If you're hunting for a microscope that won't turn your lab bench into a headache and actually pays for itself in the time you save, you're in the right place. The big question is whether you can trust a $3,000+ piece to be both rugged enough for the daily grind and precise enough for the kind of metal analysis that keeps your quality control process on point. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I first started looking at metallurgical microscopes, the sea of specs was overwhelming: magnification ranges, objective types, illumination options, price tags that could fund a small startup. I spent a few afternoons scrolling through forums where hobbyists compare binocular heads, and then a couple of evenings reading the official OMAX product sheet and the warranty terms. What kept popping up was the same concern: people want a machine that lets them see grain boundaries clearly without spending half the day fiddling with focus knobs, and they want that reliability to stretch over years, not months. That's why the OMAX M83MPTRZ 2500X Infinity caught my attention. It's marketed as a trinocular system, which essentially means you can attach a camera while still having the classic eyepiece view. In a real-world lab, that translates to being able to capture images for reports on the fly, without having to swap the microscope out for a separate photomicroscope. If you've ever tried to photograph a polished metal sample with a standard binocular microscope, you know how awkward the whole process can be: tiny adjustments, awkward camera mounts, and often a loss of focus. The built-in trinocular port sidesteps that whole dance. The Infinity optics are another selling point that isn't just marketing jargon. In practice, an Infinity-corrected system lets you insert a tube lens or other accessories without introducing additional optical errors. For metallurgists who routinely switch between bright field illumination for grain size analysis and dark field for defect detection, that flexibility can shave minutes off each setup change. I've seen labs where the tech has to walk over to a separate workstation just to change the illumination path. With this microscope, the change is a twist of a knob. Now, let's talk about the magnification. The 2500X figure sounds huge, but what matters is how that power is delivered across the useful field of view. OMAX equips this model with a set of interchangeable objectives that span low to high magnifications, and the nosepiece lets you rotate them without having to loosen the whole head. In a typical grain size measurement, you'll spend most of your time at around 200500X, where you need a clear, flat field. Users have reported that the field remains surprisingly even at the highest settings, which is crucial when you're trying to count grains along a line without missing any at the edge. The transmitted condenser is a practical detail that often gets overlooked in marketing copy. For metal samples, you usually need a bright, even illumination that passes through the thin section. The built-in condenser on the M83MPTRZ can be adjusted for aperture and focus, letting you dial in the perfect light for a polished cross-section. In my own experience with similar setups, a poorly aligned condenser can make it impossible to resolve submicron features, forcing you to take multiple images and stitch them together, a time sink you definitely want to avoid. So, who should actually consider spending on this microscope? First, small to medium-sized manufacturing labs that perform regular metallurgical inspections and need a reliable imaging solution for ISO-based reporting. If your workflow includes documenting microstructural changes after heat treatment, the trinocular port and stable Infinity optics will save you hours each month. Second, university materials science departments that run multiple classes and need a system that can survive the occasional knock without a costly repair. The 5-year warranty against manufacturing defects adds a layer of confidence, especially when you're budgeting for equipment that sits on a shared bench. On the flip side, if you're a hobbyist who only looks at polished steel once a year, the price tag might be hard to justify. The same goes for high-throughput environments where you need an automated slide scanner that can process dozens of samples per hour. This microscope is designed for manual, detail-oriented work, not for rapid batch processing. Also, the physical footprint is something to keep in mind. At just over 30 pounds, the unit isn't something you'll easily move around a crowded bench. If your lab space is tight, you'll need to allocate a dedicated corner, and you'll probably want a sturdy, vibration-isolated table. A practical weakness that shows up in real-world use is the learning curve associated with the focus mechanism. The M83MPTRZ uses a dual-knob system coarse and fine focus that feels smooth, but getting to the sweet spot where the image stays razor-sharp while you adjust the sample can take a few tries, especially if you're used to a single-knob design. It's not a deal-breaker, but it does mean that new users should budget some training time before they start producing data for regulatory submissions. Another point worth mentioning is the compatibility with accessories. The Trinocular port follows a standard 23mm size, so most camera adapters on the market will fit, but